Politics Unplugged, I'm Ann Trujillo, and no matter what you think about Judge Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court, you cannot deny that it has introduced new dialogue, specifically about how society treats sexual assault survivors, and the conversation propelled in part by comments like this.
How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember.
Whether he was mocking the testimony of Kavanaugh's accuser or, as the White House claims, was just repeating what Dr. Christine Blasey Ford said, the president's comments earlier this week, like the entire Kavanaugh hearing, well, have had a broad impact on society. So what is the effect on people who know what it's like to be in the shoes of a Dr. Ford? And is the president right when he says it's a tough time to be a man? Here is Denver 7's Jackie Crea.
How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember.
If you didn't see it, you heard about it.
I was particularly offended by his statements.
Last night, he chose to blow it. There appears to be no bottom.
Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember.
President Trump's comments on Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony, alleging Judge Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her many years ago.
His wife is shattered.
Metro State victim advocate counselor Catherine Miller has already seen more people come forward and share their stories of sexual assault.
To honor Dr. Ford's story and to honestly to honor their own.
But it can be twofold. Victims can relive the trauma, the shame, and the guilt.
That's why we talk about healing as something that you do for the rest of your life, because you could be triggered at any time, at any moment.
A man's life is shattered.
Trump's message, she says, focused on the harm to Judge Kavanaugh and the doubtful testimony from Ford.
Where's the house? I don't know.
She believes it not only helps perpetuate gender roles.
You need to be powerful and you need to be aggressive and you need to be all of these things if you are going to be a man, like really lends itself to violence and locker room talk.
But brings false reporting to the forefront that Miller says is the exception, not the rule.
A majority of the time when people are coming forward to report, they're telling the truth and we should believe them.
Trump himself called Ford a credible witness earlier in the week, but today his team focused on a lack of evidence.
No one is looking at whether or not the accusations made are corroborated, whether or not there's evidence to support them.
Jackie Crea, Denver 7.
And we want to continue this conversation with Barbara Paradiso, who's the director of the Center on Domestic Violence at the University of Colorado, Denver. Happy to have you here. This topic, it seems to really be dividing our country, male versus female. Is that the impression you get? That's the impression I get from the comments that we get into our newsroom.
Well, I certainly think there are a number of women coming forward that haven't come forward in the past, who either have a personal experience or they know a girl or a woman personally that they care about deeply who's had a similar experience. So
it has had that impact, at least then it's allowed women to come forward and to be able to be vocal about what their experience was.
I think that sexual assault is an issue that has been in the closet for decades, really throughout the history of our country. And now that there are some very powerful people coming forward, or people who are coming forward in very powerful ways, it is opening the door for more people to share their personal experience.
So is that the message then to women, that it's okay now to speak up? Is that what you interpret from all of this?
Well, I think that it's mixed. We certainly see a number of people responding to women who have disclosed their experiences around violence in very negative ways, essentially not believing them or blaming them for the fact that they may have been violated in some way. And I think that has a dampening effect. So at the same time that we see these incredibly courageous people coming forward and saying that this is something that happened to them, being willing to make themselves vulnerable, we see people reacting to them in very painful, in difficult ways, and that has a tendency to shut people down. Say, why? Why would I put myself in the position?
What do you think after watching the hearings? What's the impact to men? What's the message to men from this?
You know, I have an opportunity to work with a number of students at the University of Colorado and a number of male students. And what I'm hearing from them, I don't know about all men, but what I hear from the young men that I've spoken to is a lot of confusion. You know, they grow up believing one thing about who they are and what their rights are as a young man in our society, what they should want to be able to be with women and to pursue women, sometimes beyond the point when she may say no. And now they're hearing a completely different story. There's a different narrative that's beginning to emerge, and that causes confusion.
Confusion, yeah. So what would you like to see in this conversation, you know, in homes, in businesses, and just in society? What should the conversation be?
You know, I think the conversation, what's happening now is incredibly powerful. That there is an opportunity to have a conversation about really what are the boundaries? What does consent look like? What are the differences between the roles of men and women? Do men have the right to dominate over women when it comes to romantic relationships? So how do we get to a place of respectful relationships? I hope that those are the conversations that are going on in homes across the country.
But who should be having those conversations?
All of us should be having those. I think right now we're having them in a more public way than we ever have had before. We're certainly seeing our leaders in Congress grapple with this issue. And I think it's happening everywhere. I know I'm having these conversations with my children, and I imagine in homes across the country these conversations are happening between couples and their children.
So in Dr. Ford's case, we're talking about an event that happened 36 years ago. So many people have come out to say, why didn't she report? Or why does it take so long for this information to come out? Explain that.
Well, I think Dr. Blasey Ford actually did a great job of explaining that herself during the hearings. There's a tremendous amount of shame associated with being a victim of sexual assault. Oftentimes, because of the learning that all of us receive around sexual assault, we have a tendency to question whether or not that's really what happened. We're also have a tendency to want to blame ourselves for the fact that something happened. So it's not an easy thing to come forward about. We also find that the people around us have a tendency to judge. When you say that you've been a victim of sexual assault, a lot of different images come to mind to people. And frequently, for victims, those images are not necessarily positive. So there's not a lot that encourages victims to come forward and share their story. Quite the contrary. And
especially in this case, when we're talking about somebody who's in full view of the world, essentially, right?
Right.
That was a big step.
That was a huge step. Took a tremendous amount of courage on her part.
So what impact will this have on your work, on the work of other people who deal with sexual assault survivors?
Well, we're certainly seeing numbers rise. So there are more and more people who are reaching out for assistance, which is a good thing. I think there are more and more people who are willing to come forward and share their story. And I think the more that happens, our awareness about this issue and the many different forms that can take increases. And I hope ultimately that leads to better law, better policy, much more, a deeper understanding and much more supportive environments for victims.
And certainly more conversations need to be had. Barbara Paradiso, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate your insight. Back in a moment.